Fantastic. Welcome, everyone, to ASYNC, the second ASYNC of the second quarter of this century. There you go. How about that? It is lovely to see you all here. Yeah, Chris doing the maths. It's lovely to see you all here today. I just have a few announcements before we get on to the main event. Firstly, look around you. Behold the beautiful venue and decor that we have. Look into your stomachs and think about the delicious pizza that you've eaten. That is all thanks to Runway East, the venue that is putting us on for absolutely free, and I'm incredibly grateful to them. Thank you very much. And behold, the microphone in my hand and the massive screen and everything. This is and Cameron over in the corner, our resident expert. That is thanks to Silicon Brighton, who have been supporting us through thick and thin through the last few years. And I am immensely, immeasurably grateful to them always. So yeah, and they did pay for the drinks tonight. So thank you, Silicon Brighton. However, I need to say that we are looking for a new drink sponsor. So starting from next month, if we need a new drink sponsor, if anyone knows of anyone that can sponsor either one event or like multiple events going forward, please let me know. Of course, you're welcome to come up here and do a shout out about your company and if you are hiring any positions. If not, we won't be providing any drinks, but we will still, of course, be going to Unbarred around the corner. So just heads up, that's starting from next month. It's drinks are not guaranteed anymore, but yeah, come and talk to me. Before I leave this section of support, I just wanted to remind everyone that Silicon Brighton, behind Helen, sorry, are putting on Evolve Conference, the first ever Evolve Conference. So Silicon Brighton support not just ASYNC, but an entire smorgasbord, a plethora of different meetups. And they have made this city a fantastic hub for all things technical. So I've got my ticket. Please go to that website, go and check it out, grab a ticket, and I will see you there. And now, without further ado, unless I've forgotten anything else, I've forgotten the code of conduct. Rats, I apologize. We have a code of conduct. I'm afraid we don't have a slide up here for it. It's asyncjs.com/code of conduct. The TLDR of it is please be lovely to each other. If anyone feels at all uncomfortable, come and talk to me or Jake over there. Hi, Jake. And we will take action accordingly. Anyway, thank you very much for listening to me. What you really want to be here tonight doing is listening to Helen. So please let me introduce the wonderful Helen.
I mean, I don't know. There's like free pizza and beer, so I think that's probably really, you know. But anyway, I did say I'd do some talking, so I'm gonna do some talking, I guess. So the title of my talk is "When is a button not a button?" Yeah, I'm going to talk about semantic HTML and accessibility APIs, which I'm sure is everyone's favorite topic. I am a front-end developer and accessibility specialist, and that's not my owl. I'm sorry. People always ask me if that's my owl. It's not my owl. I wish it was my owl. It is a real owl. Her name is Moon, and I met her just outside of Chichester, and she was very lovely. She's a tawny owl, and that's not what the talk is about. Anyway, so yeah, I used to work at Brandwatch. I led the accessibility function there. I don't anymore. Now I am contracting at the BBC on the audience-facing accessibility team. So that's nice. Who cares? So why have I done this? You don't have to answer that. It's okay. Are there any fans of the Great British Bake Off in this room? Yeah? Okay, cool. Are you familiar with the concept of an illusion cake? It's a cake that looks like a thing. You don't know it's a cake. Well, you probably do know that's a cake. But in theory, you think that's a sewing machine, but it's not really. It's just cake. You can't actually do anything with that. Well, you can thread it. You can see it's been threaded, but if you actually wanted to like fix something, it wouldn't work. It would just be cake, and that would be kind of rubbish. So if anyone is a fan, just so you know, this is Christiane's sewing machine cake from the latest series of Bake Off. Apparently it didn't taste very good either. So you can't sew with it and also don't really want to eat it, so that's a shame. Here's another cake. This one was apparently quite good, but you can't read those books. You can't do it. I can recommend at least The Song of Achilles there. That's a really good book. But if you actually came across this and you picked it up, you wouldn't be able to read that. Just you wouldn't be able to. It's just cake. It's just cake. What the hell am I talking about? So have you ever heard of the idea of a narrative conceit? Like a joke, it works best when you explain it to the audience more and more. So it's a thing I'm using to talk about things that don't behave the way you expect them to. In those cases, they were cake rather than the things you actually wanted. Sometimes that can happen with a user interface. Yeah. So I'm going to talk about assistive technology and what that is, what accessibility APIs are, what can go wrong, and how we can try and not do that. So I'm going to do a little bit of like basic housekeeping, which is what is disability? Who does disability affect? Basically everyone, but here are some stats. So an estimated 1.3 billion people experience significant disability. This represents a 16% of the world's population, according to the World Health Organization. And according to an October parliamentary research briefing, 16.1 million people in the UK had disability in 2022 to 2023, which is about 24% of the total population. And also, this is the one minority group that any of us could become a part of at any time. So think about that whenever you worry whether accessibility is relevant. And another thing I just wanted to like make everyone think about a little bit. The way a lot of people think about disability is the medical model, which is that it's a problem of the person. Someone has an impairment, that is a medical issue, that is something that is their problem. The social model of disability is that disability is a problem of barriers that you experience. So if you, for example, were in a wheelchair and you went into a lift, or you went to a building that had lift access, are you disabled? You can get in just like everybody else can. And I just wanted to put that in there so people are thinking about barriers and who's responsible for those. What's assistive technology? So assistive technology helps people with disabilities perform tasks that would otherwise be difficult or impossible. I have some, so do quite a lot of you, I can see. So that could be a wheelchair, hearing aid, glasses. On the web, that could be a screen reader, voice recognition, switch systems, head mouse, there's all sorts of things. And a lot of things that start out as assistive technology become things that everybody uses, like voice assistants, if anyone's used Siri or Alexa, or closed captions, subtitles, or audiobooks. This is called the curb cut effect, which I haven't put on the slide, which is where something that was designed for people with disabilities becomes useful for everybody. So a curb cut is that little thing on the pavement where it's a little ramp where you can get down onto the roads, and that's helpful for everybody, right? That's helpful for people who have limited mobility. That's helpful for people who are carrying heavy bags. So that's the curb cut effect. I am particularly going to be focusing on screen readers as a type of assistive technology here. It's not the only one. A lot of people think anyway, this is the one I'm focusing on particularly. They are primarily, but not exclusively, used by people with visual impairments. VoiceOver is the one I will be using for my demos here, which is the native Mac one, but there are others. JAWS is one that is very, very popular. It is a paid for one on Windows, and NVDA is an open source Windows one. I'm pretty sure every single operating system comes with a built-in screen reader, but these are sort of like most popular ones. I don't know if this video is going to work with a clicker. Let's find out. This is going to be a demonstration of a screen reader. It's a video. It's going to sound really weird, but let's see how we go. There's no sound.
Shall I jump into action?
Yes, please. It won't be accurate, but it might give the impression. Yes.
No, it's not at the moment.
Anyone do a good impression of that sort of holding?
I think that's the Monty Python one, actually. It's how I feel most of the time, particularly now.
I've got also shared audio.
Can I ask a question whilst we're loading?
Yes.
Those stats were actually kind of mind-blowing. So significant disabilities. That's 16% of the world's population, and 24% of the UK.
Yes, I don't have the details on exactly what their methodology was or what they're including in that, but I can share links to those things afterwards if anyone would like to hear more about that.
Yeah, that'd be interesting because that seems like it'd be interesting to know if it's just a methodology difference or if there's something value in that.
Well, I could give a guess to that, and that would be an aging population. I see a hand at the back there. Yes. Yes.
No way.
He hadn't realised he had it himself.
I have a friend who we learned he was colorblind while he was creating a character in the game Oblivion. And he didn't realise that his character looked like a kind of like funky punk person, and he thought he'd done like a standard, fantasy character. And we're like, oh, bright pink hair, that's really unusual for like a wizard or something. And he was like, yeah. Yeah. Also, I stood by it. I thought that was a good choice for a wizard in Oblivion. That game's very brown. Yes. This is unfortunate because I was kind of relying on examples in this.
Is there sound? Sorry, is the sound up on the actual computer?
Yeah, try. Yeah, boost up the sound. It'll be really quiet.
Yeah, it's coming from your.
It's coming from my actual laptop.
Visited.
No.
Semantic HTML and accessibility APIs on Meta. Visited. Level 1. Link. When is a button not a button? Semantic HTML and accessibility APIs. Level 1. Link. Image. View when is a button not a button? Semantic HTML and accessibility APIs on Meta. Presented by Helen Brockelbank. 2025-0206019.
This was a learning for me. That's how the time element gets announced with voiceover. Oh God, that's horrible.
Image. Map of leads. Visited. Link. Image. When is a button not a button? Semantic HTML and accessibility APIs. On the Thursday, the 6th of February, we'll be joined by Helen Brockelbank.
That's plenty. We don't need that anymore. That's fine. So I was trying to get there, but what it sounds like when a screen reader is working, and the thing I wanted to get you to take from that was that it's announcing the elements, the content, its relationship with everything else on the page. So it gets you to understand like what the structure of the page is. And now I have a little audience participation bit, which it's not really, you don't actually have to say anything, but I'm going to ask you a question. How many buttons do you think are in the next example? And if anyone is like a bake-off head here, this I think is the Gâteau Vert challenge from 2018, which involves spinach for colouring the icing, which sounds awful to me. But, you know, in case anyone was wondering. So how many buttons are there? You can't tell? Oh. I'm going to try another video in a moment. I'll give you a heads up each time.
Yeah, so you won't be able to speak, but
Okay.
you
Okay. I will. Okay, this is going to be good. Okay, so I'm going to show you how many there are, and then I'm going to shut up.
The web area. Bad buttons. Frame. Click me. Click me. Button. You are currently on a button. Inside the frame. To click this button, press Control, Option, Space. To click me. You are currently on a selectable text. Inside the frame. To exit this web area. Click me. Button. You click me. You are currently on a selectable text. Inside the frame. Form controls menu. Click me. Button. Click me. Button. Voiceover off.
Yes, that last bit was just in case you didn't get the point there. There's two buttons on this page. It was a trick. Woohoo! Yeah. There's the code pen. Yeah, so we have 2 actual buttons and 3 divs with on-clicks. They're all calling the same function. This is the only bit of JavaScript in the talk, sorry. And that's what it looks like. They're all using the same CSS class. So they all kind of do the same thing, except actually they don't. Oh no, oh no. Why? So first let's talk about the cake. It's a sponge cake, right? This was made by Liam from Series 8. I don't think this was actually on the telly, but I just thought it was a really good illusion cake and I wanted to include it. So that's good. Apparently he's a presenter on Junior Bake Off now, if anyone watches that. I don't, but you know. Anyway, what happened there? So there were 5 elements with the same styling and they were all calling the same function. Why were they not all picked up by assistive technology? Oh, look, it's the thing I was going to talk about that isn't cake. Yeah, cool. Okay. So what's an accessibility API? So assistive technology well, actually, I'm going to go before the bit I did at the beginning of the slide here. Computers used to be text, and that was really easy. It was just text. You could just read out text. Brilliant. And then we all had to have bloody graphical user interfaces like idiots. And at that point, assistive technology had to intercept like low-level graphics functions or low-level graphics instructions. And that was really, really difficult and prone to errors. Let's be honest, I do actually like GUIs, really. It's quite useful, but, you know, made this quite difficult. So in the late 90s, we got accessibility APIs, and they are now present in all operating systems, as far as I know. And they translate between the assistive technology and whatever's going on in the user interface and tell the user what the content is and what they need to do to interact with it. So the building blocks of that are accessible objects. So they have a name, a role, a state, and well, they don't always have a description, but sometimes they have a description. So the name is a unique identifier. What is this specific instance of this thing? How do we refer to it? The role, what is it? What does it do? What am I expecting it to do when I interact with it, if I can interact with it at all? What is its state? Like, can I do something with it? Like, is it pressed? Is it checked? Is it collapsed? Is it expanded? Is it on fire? I don't think that's actually part of it, but in theory. And is there extra information that we should know about this? So I put the caption element as like an example here for a table where it might give you more information about what's going on and what you're going to see in there. Here's the fire. Yeah, so its unique identifier is Helen's slice of cake. Its role is cake. I expect it to be something I can eat. It's not been eaten yet, so I know I can eat it. But the relationships it has are, it's on someone's hand, which is disgusting, and it's currently covered in burning candles, which means that if I actually eat it right now, it would be a really bad idea. This is a more normal example. So that's a submit button, and it has a focus state on it. So its name is submit, its role is button, and its state is focused. That's helpful to know. I know that I know what it's going to do, except I don't actually know really what it's going to do because I don't know what it's going to submit. I don't know what its relationship is. So here's the building block, but you also need to know more than that. You need to know about the relationships and context. So I've got a couple of little examples there. There's like a link. Is that part of navigation? Is that part of an article I was reading? What's that going to do? That confirm button, what is that doing? What's that confirming? What should I be typing in that text field? I don't know. So you need to know what it is, but you also need to know what it relates to on the page. You need to know the whole structure, which is where you get the accessibility tree. Yay! And there's a little example of that, which you can find in Chrome. Very exciting if you ever want to have a look at it. Firefox also does this. I'm just going to, maybe everything does. I don't know. Those are the ones I use. So the accessibility tree is a browser-generated hierarchical structure based on the DOM. Let's just read the slides. Let's just do that. So that represents all of the elements, the properties they have, the relationships they have to each other, and that's in a format that accessibility APIs can use, which is great. Cool. But then what happens if you don't? Why does it not work sometimes? So here is it's not a button, but it looks like a button. It's made of cake. So you can yeah. It's not from Bake Off either, but it's, you can see what I did there. So the div styled to look like a button still has the role of div, as we found in the little example. So the browser will tell the accessibility API that is a structural non-interactive container element. You can't interact with it. It's not focusable. It's just got some stuff in it. So a user will have no idea that they can do something with that. And some people will just stick roll button on it. That will tell the user that's a button, but that will not add any extra functionality. You'll have to re-implement that yourself. Why bother? Mostly this was I just wanted an excuse to get this cake in, honestly. This was Samaya's cake from the latest season of Bake Off, and look at it. It's beautiful. But the summary bit is important as well. So UI components that look the part but don't function as expected are harmful, unlike cake, except maybe for you. Yeah. So it causes frustration for assistive technology users, but it doesn't just do that. It also prevents them from participating in the world. The examples I've got there are checking the news, checking your bank statements, checking your work pay slips, online shopping, or even having a job. Because if you make software as a service and you make that software as a service using an interface that people can't use, are those people going to get hired to actually use it? Like, you're basically stopping people from having jobs, which is not great. Let's not do that. So let's keep the web accessible. I feel like I've flown through this way too quickly. Sorry. Okay. Don't fight the browser. With the button example, you could just use that, and then you don't really have to do anything. It's great. So yeah, accessibility can be quite a lot of work. It's quite a lot of testing, but if you just use the things that already exists, then you don't have to do very much. It's great. So use semantic HTML elements where you can. They already have implicit roles and behaviors, and they are most likely to be recognized by assistive technology. I say that because not everything's, it's always more complicated than that. But sometimes the thing you want doesn't exist. Here's an opera joke. It's an opera cake. Yeah, sorry. Sorry, yeah. What's your favorite aria? I think mine is probably by Puccini. O mia bambina cara is probably my favorite aria. Anyway, so accessible rich internet applications, which has nothing to do with Puccini. So they are useful for communicating with assistive technologies when there isn't otherwise a mechanism. So don't use them instead of semantic HTML. They are useful for enhancing what already exists. And they are useful for things like error messages, live content updates, giving more structural context. So I've got a little example there, which is ARIA current, which is nice, which tells you that you're on the current page. Yeah, and ARIA describe by would be very useful for like linking error messages to form elements and so forth. So these are things that don't necessarily already exist. This is when you would use ARIA. But don't just assume it works. Things never work. Nothing works. Yeah. So this is not an exhaustive list of things you should do when you're accessibility testing, but they're like the basic things you should start with. So do you have valid HTML? Great start. Can you use the UI with only a keyboard? A lot of people don't check that. That's actually really, really indicative of whether it's good. And a screen reader, I know it's quite hard to use a screen reader if you're not used to using them. I am not like a power user of screen readers by any stretch of the imagination. But give it a try. You will find that whatever computer you have has one, or your phone has one installed, and it's really helpful to see if you can get through it, get through the content with the screen reader. I'm sticking with that disclaimer because it's really important to know that this is not the whole of accessibility testing. There's a lot more to it than that. Good. So yeah, sorry for running through that way too quickly. Disability can affect any of us, and probably will. Assistive technology exists, and lots of people use it to access the web, not just keyboard and mouse. Browsers use accessibility APIs to communicate with assistive technology. Accessibility APIs rely on correct use of semantic HTML and ARIA, and widespread misuse of HTML and ARIA excludes people with disabilities from everyday life. Please don't do that. Here's a neurodiversity cake. Like, genuinely, that was what that was. This was Lizzie from, I didn't write what season she was from. Anyway, it was the extraordinary cake, and it was supposed to be a celebration of her various neurodiverse traits like dyscalculia, ADHD, and various other things. And I just thought it was lovely, and I thought it'd be a nice thing to put at the end. Sorry, that's all I've got.
Fantastic. Thanks so much, Helen. So firstly, I thought I knew about Great British Bake Off, but I did not. Like, I have learned a lot from that. But also, I did think I knew about web accessibility, and it turns out that there's a bunch that I still need to learn there. So I hugely appreciate it, Helen. Does anyone? I have questions, but does anyone have a question before me? CJ, let me just pass you the microphone.
How does it work with React Native apps and stuff like that? I know you can put some accessibility tags in JavaScript in React Native, but that's about it, really.
I am not an expert on React Native, to be honest, or apps in general.
Okay.
So I'm more of a, yeah.
Thank you. I think you said earlier, but the built-in tech in devices for like assistive readers and stuff like that, I think would handle a mobile app. Is that on? I think.
I know you can put some tags in for text for accessibility. Like if you have a line of code, you can put that in like you would with like button and stuff like that. You can do that. But I don't know how a screen reader works on a mobile because I've never tried it.
And with React Native, I have absolutely no idea. I've never used it. I know the general rule of thumb with app development is use whatever native components are provided to you and don't try and reinvent the wheel. And that's supposed to be the most accessible way of doing things.
Okay.
But I don't know anything about React Native.
All right, great. Thanks.
No, I think that's fantastic advice, Helen. And it's CJ, it's probably not too hard to sort of give it a go with your getting your phone voiceover set up. Depending, it's worth giving it a quick check. I would
so
say,
there's voiceover on iOS and there's talkback on Android. They will be included by default, and there will be resources on the internet if you want to test with them.
Yeah.
Hi. What's your opinion of Chrome extensions that parse pages and give you WCAG results.
What sense? Like ones that give you
can
feedback?
on
or-
Chrome. You can install extensions, and you can just you can kind of run it on your pages, and it gives you accessibility ratings and scores. And
It can definitely help with some things. It can be useful for finding things like, say, if I had a button that didn't have any text on it, that's something that could be detected by something like that, or images without text. But it couldn't tell me if the reading order was something that would make sense to a person. And it couldn't tell me if it was usable. So there's definitely value in those things, and I think they're really useful, but they don't account for the whole experience. Really, the best thing you can do is user testing, but I appreciate that not everyone can do that. But definitely manual testing is necessary as well as those things.
Do you have a preferred automated extension that you might jump to first before you do your manual testing?
I mean, Axe is useful, but it doesn't catch everything. So Wave is one that's quite helpful for finding a few extra things. What else would I use? Headings map. I think actually maybe Wave can do that as well, checking things like heading order. There's quite a few of them out there. Those are some of the ones that I've used, but I think there are probably more that are probably perfectly decent. I think a lot of things use Axe under the hood in the end anyway, but like Lighthouse, for example, that's basically Axe, but with some of the rules removed.
Nice. Lighthouse being Google Chrome's like
Yes.
page score thing. Sorry, go. Yeah.
Hi, thanks for the talk, first of all, thank you. The other thing is, you're talking about manual user testing. I remember hearing back in the day, the companies used to actually hire people with various different, diversity points, and they could, you could hire them to test your UI with those teams of people. Do you know of any companies that still do that sort of service or not at all?
Yes, so at Brownwatch we used Fable. They employ assistive technology users to do testing. There's another one that's based in the UK called DAC, I think, DAC. I've not used them personally, so I can't vouch for like what their output is like. Fable were great. I thought Fable's output was really, really helpful.
Fable were great. It was I strongly remember seeing a blind user trying to use like some of the code that I'd developed and failing, and honestly it's just torturous. Like and it's one of those tortures that you need to put yourself through to know just how important this stuff is. So yeah, like you want to crawl under the desk and make it stop, but you have to go through that and you have to see it.
I would say it's also really worth seeing how a screen reader user does use assistive technology from the other side, which is to see how powerful it can be for them when it works well. Because if you've not seen, and I've seen it through Helen's work, like how fast people go through a screen reader, like they have to slow it down for non-screen reader users to understand what they are, like what's even being read. So I think it's the idea that like if you take the barriers away, then the technology is actually very good as long as you work with it.
Exactly, great point, Matt. I wanted to ask I mean, we've almost had an entire async without anyone mentioning AI, and of course we can't do that. So yeah, I just wanted to get your thoughts on a question that we actually had at the last async, which was around the relationship between all of these newfangled LLMs that are helping people code, depending on your point of view, and whether or not they're helping develop accessible applications or not. Have you looked into that at all and had any thoughts and feelings on it?
I have concerns about it because what have they been trained on? A lot of websites are not accessible, and if what they've been trained on is something that is not accessible, then what they're going to produce is not accessible as well. So that's my concern. It doesn't mean that they couldn't produce something accessible, but you would have to train them to do that, and I don't necessarily think anybody has. So,
Yeah, I mean, that's, sorry, one sec.
Just a remark, but it might be interesting to think about that from the other angle. And by adding this rich semantic detail that is unobserved but behind the scenes in the markup, this is a button, this is a thing, I think it's going to make agentic AI and things like playwright testing a lot easier because those kind of automation tools will be able to access the semantics of your site rather than relying on anyway.
yeah, I mean, one of the things that it helps is things like SEO and reader modes and stuff like that, which I didn't mention because that's sort of not the topic of the talk. But like, there are using semantic HTML is helpful for other things as well.
I'm sorry, this is more of a comment than a question.
Oh no.
But one of the things, like, so this isn't something that comes up in my work quite often, but it has really helped me to think about the world and the world I live in. So one of the things that happens is, does anyone play board games a lot? Does anyone know Ark Nova? Or Terraforming Mars? Games with like 60, 600, 700 cards that you have to shuffle. And like one of the things that is like a pain for as someone who is like quite good with cards to be able to shuffle that long. And you look online and you see people again and again saying, how is the best way? Can I get a mechanical shuffler? And the answer always is mechanical shufflers will damage your cards. Do not use them. Which for me, who is someone who is more or less like, I am fine with my hands enough to the point where shuffling does not cause me pain. It's not like something that causes me issues. Like, that's a fine answer. I can do whatever shuffle I need. I can do whatever shuffle I need. But someone who's like arthritic in their hands or has some other disability that causes them to struggle to do something like shuffle something with the cards, that like comes from like to a point of like, fuck, I have to shuffle 600 cards to like, I can't play this game. This game just becomes unable for me to play. And so while this talks specifically about like struggles that happen in the web, I think it's super interesting in like something you can think about in life in general, in like, what are the things that I take advantage of that I can do as someone who doesn't have these specific problems at this specific moment? But like for someone who's like a little bit less able, who has specific trouble, that this becomes like a barrier. Like, I can't play a game I want to play. I can't go to a certain shop, which is like, especially in a town with Brighton that's older and has like shops with stairs built in, or like there are specific ability needs to reach these things that like change from being like, oh, this is annoying for me, to like, I'm really like struggling with like something that I envision as something that's like a pain, to like something that becomes a barrier. I really think this is an interesting talk to like take, not just from like a web dev environment, but like really think about what it means about in your built environment, in like how you live your life. It's something to really think about in a wider sense. Sorry.
So I mentioned the employment thing because I have literally had experiences of speaking to people as a representative of a company, speaking to another person who works for a different company who's trying to use the software of the company that I am working for, and saying they're worried they're going to lose their job because their performance is not considered to be good enough because they can't use the software properly. And they're having to ask their colleagues to do various things for them because of the way that we have built the thing. And it's not a reflection on their abilities. It's just that we have just not done a good job and they're worried they're going to lose their job over it. And that's basically why I agreed to do talks like this, even though I'm hella anxious, because I think that's really bad. It'd be good if people stopped doing that.
Yeah, that's the most important thing. Really important. Okay, we have a question came in through StreamYard. Amy says, hi, I'm new to web development in general. I was reading about hiding and moving elements off screen so sighted users can't see them, but screen readers can read them. Can you say a bit about that technique?
Yes, so it is a valid technique. If it's possible not to do that, I think it's better not to do that because not everyone who is using a screen reader can't see the screen. They might be able to see the screen a bit, or they might be able to see the screen completely. Like some people who use screen readers for reasons other than sight impairments. And if you can see the screen, and then your focus doesn't go where you're expecting it to, that's quite jarring and quite confusing. So it's not a technique that I would say don't ever use, but try not to use it if you can, just to make it, ideally you want the focus order to actually follow what you can see, if you can. That's not to say never do this, but sparingly is what I would say to that.
It makes a lot of sense. Thanks. Niall.
So on MDN, there's over 100 HTML elements. Are any of those elements like sort of things that you should steer clear of and use an alternative instead? Even like going to the sort of the case of maybe a table versus CSS grid, or like sort of more niche things like H group or DD or whatever else.
So a table, if you have tabular data and it is actually a table, use a table. There are shortcuts that screen reader users can use, or like we're focusing on screen readers. That's not the only assistive technology that exists. Let's be clear about that. But a lot of the talk was about that. And it is helpful if you have an actual table that really has tabular data to use an actual table. I have mixed feelings about the date picker. I don't know how good that is. I don't know if I'm not convinced we have a good solution for date pickers. I don't know.
CJ is asking if it works with the tab key.
I think it does, but I think it's also a really confusing and weird experience for people and doesn't always behave the way you expect it to. And there's a difference between technically accessible and something someone can use. That is something I also want to like. I haven't really mentioned that here, but a lot of people think about conforming to the WCAG, the Web Content Accessibility Guidelines, and those are useful. They are very helpful for giving you like an idea of the things you need to check. But just because you conform to those doesn't mean you've made something that is good UX for someone.
Yeah. I have a question about pattern libraries and design libraries. What are they called? Design
systems?
Design systems. Let's go with that. Yeah. Design
I guess
systems.
it depends.
Yeah.
It depends what you're talking about.
So many of the top design systems these days do have a decent focus on accessibility, I would say. What are the pitfalls to look out for when you are building things with the design library, a modern like accessible design library? What are the things that you still need to think about and be aware of?
So you can definitely use a component that has been well tested for accessibility and use it in a way that was not very helpful. Hopefully you'll have documentation about the things you need to take care of. Maybe you won't. I mean, to give a sort of basic example, the talk was about buttons. If you have a button component and you don't put any text in it, that's not very helpful for somebody. Like you have an accessible component, but you have used it in an inaccessible way. So you do have to be thinking about these things as well. Yeah, you can't just say that everything is sorted out because you're using a design system. They are really helpful though, doing the heavy lifting. I'm a big fan of design systems generally because I think they can take care of a lot of the really annoying stuff that you don't want to think about, but they don't take care of literally everything. And if you're using an off-the-shelf design system, check that they've done what they say they've done, because a lot of people like to say they're accessible. How have they tested it? You don't necessarily know. So if you want to be really sure that you're actually catering for the users you think you are, check.
Yes, great advice. Jake, sorry, he hasn't asked one first yet.
This is sort of a two-part question. Buttons should have text in them. What about buttons that just have icons in them?
Okay, add an ARIA label to it, or put alt text in the image. If it's an SVG image, then you might need to do something different, but at least put an ARIA label on the button. That'll probably sort that out.
So the follow-up thing was sort of related to what Niall said. I don't know if anyone still does it anymore, but at some point people stopped using the italic tag thing for italics and started using it to render icons. How does that work with screen readers and other assistive technology?
The eye. I have no idea how that works. I mean, if I was going to, okay, so I was about to say you could use the M for emphasis. But actually, I would say probably separate your structure from your presentation and use CSS to make something look different. But I actually have no idea what the I tag would do. I've never tried that with assistive technology. I have no idea what it does. Yeah, if anything.
So I've just got a little thought. Is that because we're talking about accessibility? How would you restructure your? Would it be better to restructure your UX as well? Because a lot of people make websites or mobiles with beautiful UX and images like PNGs or JPEGs or even SVGs, but the way they structure them might not necessarily be coherent. A lot of people work in a linear. Some people work linearly. Some people don't. They just put it anywhere, and as long as it works. How does that work with the screen reader? Does it make any difference, or does it completely mess everything up?
Well, I would definitely say that I think accessibility is a kind of niche form of UX in some ways. You are thinking about user experience, and if you're looking at it as just a compliance form, then I think you're probably making a mistake, because really it is about user experience. In terms of how a screen reader works, so I don't think I fully understand the question. Sorry.
Sorry, I just think about most people, like I code, but I also design as well. So most designers don't think about user experience necessarily when they design a page, because they just want it to look pretty. So
I would say that's a mistake, because if you are designing something, it should have a function. If you're just doing something pretty, that's art, and that's worthwhile as well. But if it doesn't have a function, that's not really design.
Okay. Okay. But but if you want somebody to use your app, you've got to make it look nice as well as function. So you need to add those in at the same time. That's what UX is all about. It's not necessarily just about how it works; it's about how it looks. So what I'm trying to say is that if you're designing your app, I design my app, I'm very linear, so everything comes together, but not a lot of people do that. I just wondered if there was rules when it comes to screen readers for that sort of thing.
So there is, you're sort of thinking about focus order, perhaps? Like,
So you had
sorry.
It's fine if
More
you've
of a
got
dialogue.
sorry. It's fine if you've got a whole page of like icons that are just in a line. But like if you had a grid, or a lot of designers work on a grid system. So how do you? Are there rules with accessibility? You should do that so that your readers work. That's what I'm trying to suggest. So does the reader just go through it like, or does it? Yeah, yeah. But how does that mess up the screen reader, or should you?
Well, the screen
That's
reader
what
will
I'm
focus
trying
in
to-
the
that's
same
what I'm
order.
trying to get to.
The screen reader will focus in the same order that a keyboard user would focus. So whatever the logical focus order, whatever the focus order you have implemented is, it will do. But it might not. If it's not what you can see, that will be confusing for people. Yeah.
Hi, I wanted to add up on that actually. So when we think about accessibility, we think in many layers. It can be screen reading, it can be the visual content that is visible to the user. So I think it touches onto the structure of your elements, but also the CSS, because if you're making the size of your fonts like with pixels and not using root element modifier, then when the user zooms in on your screen, it won't really zoom up correctly. And some elements might be invisible on the web browser. So I think it's all tied in to how you conceive the web and the UX experience. There is the UI, which is more the visual side, but the UX is really architectural in terms of like you conceive it as a journey from beginning to the end. And I was actually working on an accessibility thing this week. Like it caused me so much trouble, to be honest, because and it's also tied into how the business works. So it's all good, and I think it's a valuable thing to make it accessible to everyone, like in the example for constructed environments, like built environments. However, businesses don't really see this from a profitable view. I think they see it as more like, oh, I need to be compliant again for ADA or VGAC. And this is just like another hassle for most businesses. And like in my case, we try to retrofit something that is built completely haphazardly using React with dynamic components, like with divs, lots of like non-semantic elements. And it's really costly to rebuild everything for accessibility. So sometimes like even the way we do accessibility is like just adding area labels, I'm sorry. And like using sideways to make the screen reader say what it needs to say, but I definitely agree that it needs to be semantic. But all I'm saying is it's kind of rooted down in the business model of companies. I think it needs to be from the get-go like made accessible, and every designer, front-end developers, because it's mostly front-end this thing, they need to like come together and really conceive this from the built environment thing, like from the human perspective. It's not just like, it's not just for disabled. Like I don't like that term also. It's really for everyone. Like my mother uses a zoomed in version of her phone because she doesn't see small text. And I always think about her sometimes, like when I'm doing like HTML, because we think that like that font, like 14 pixel or 16 pixel is visible for everyone, but it's not. And sometimes they might be viewing that on this, I don't know, 15-inch laptop screen, and they may not be getting the whole thing. So it's quite a bit of a challenge to make one process, one journey, whatever application that is, to be accessible by everyone. But it's a great, it's a great challenge.
Yeah.
Just.
It is much easier if you do it at the beginning, but I completely hear the business problem, and I have a lot of opinions about what our society values and incentivizes. Sorry? Yes.
They do. I'm very mindful that we've been absolutely hammering Helen with questions. So I'm going to take one more question, if that's okay, and then.
Hi. Yeah. Sorry to keep asking you questions. Quick point. I don't know. I've never even heard whether the law, the DDA 95. You familiar with that?
No.
DDA 95, I believe, is a law that says about accessibility, and it's a provision that basically states the fact that a company is legally liable if they don't provide accessibility.
So I would probably point to the Equality Act 2010 for that, but yes.
Yeah, but unfortunately, I think we've just answered the question, because I was going to say, do you know of any web companies that have actually been prosecuted?
In the US, yes. Yes, I do.
Not in the US, not in the UK, though.
I'm not aware of any in the UK. That doesn't mean it hasn't happened.
No.
But certainly Domino's had I think it was $1 million lawsuit because their website wasn't accessible in the US and a blind user couldn't order a pizza.
That's cool.
So yeah, it does happen.
Yeah. No, that's good.
Man, that's one expensive pizza. I said last question, but I do have another question that's come in over the chat. I am going to give it to you, but I am not entirely certain I understand it. Do you have an opinion? Sorry, this is Louise. Thanks for the question. Do you have an opinion on accessibility overlays being more widely used on websites?
Oh, yes, I do. have
Oh,
an
she
opinion.
does.
I do
Sorry,
have an
I'm
opinion
so
on
sorry,
that.
Louise.
Yeah. Speaking of lawsuits, that's come up recently. So there are these companies that sell effectively JavaScript widgets called accessibility overlays, and they'll say if you install this, you will be WCAG compliant and you will not have any lawsuits ever, and everything will be accessible and fine and beautiful. And a company called Accessitive has just been fined. Is it $1 million? I don't know. At least that, and banned from talking about or making false claims about their abilities in the US. And I think another company called Userway is currently facing a similar lawsuit. There's been a lot of controversy about overlay for quite a long time. And it now seems to be actually, something seems to be happening about it. I don't know that every single one of them is bad, but there's a lot of snake oil in the industry, and I definitely wouldn't suggest going for an overlay over trying to make your website accessible in the first place. I think at best they might be able to add some extra tools. I don't think they can sort out everything that's wrong with it. And there's definitely some people who are actually frauds.
Yeah. Oh, go on. Okay, go on. One last.
Just from a perspective of argumenting to do accessibility when you design, is there a way in Google Analytics, for instance, to see whether people are using screen readers?
I don't believe there is, no.
Well, as a comment to what you said about having businesses do this, you could say like, well, if 10% of your customers can't use your site, you're losing 10% of the market. So
I think one thing I would add to that, I don't think there is a way of actually seeing that. But also, if people assume they can't use it, they won't be using it. So they won't show up in your analytics either. This is something I've noticed previously. I've actually worked in places where I found we actually got more complaints about accessibility once we started fixing things. And I believe it's because people thought we were actually paying attention and actually listening to them. And they suddenly thought, oh, it's actually worth complaining now because you might actually do something. Whereas before, it wasn't even worth engaging with your company at all.
Yeah, what a fantastic point. Yeah. Okay. Thanks so much, folks. I just want to add my personal experience, which is that for the first 5 or 10 years of my career, I just did not think about accessibility because I was working in business-to-business companies, and I thought, well, like there was no push for it from the rest of the company, and it just wasn't top of mind. I deeply regret that now, and that torture that I sat through watching someone try to use code that I'd built, like that was well justified torture, and I think about it constantly. So please do not be like me. I know there are a few people who are more at the start of their careers. Do not be like me. Keep this top of your mind when you're developing, because to begin with, you won't hear about it, but eventually someone is going to get screwed over if you're not thinking about this. So yeah, such a vital talk. Thank you so much, Helen. Huge round of applause for Helen. Okay. Thanks again to Cameron and Silicon Brighton. Thanks again to Runway East. We're going to head to Unbarred, which is down the road, turn right. It's all downhill, so good stumbling distance. We'd love to see you there. If you could put your drinks and stuff over there, and that salad needs to be eaten, everyone. So yeah, you go for it. Thanks so much for coming, everyone.